Yeah, thank you very much. So yeah, yeah. So I thought, like, okay, yeah. How do we think? So now, like the title itself might sound like way more. Please come in. Way more. I would say, way more like yeah. That would be like I would talk like maybe for like 45 minutes and then tell you all about how you think. But actually, actually, this talk was thought more about to talk a little in general of what I've been doing here in Japan for the last year. I'm actually going to head back to Europe in 2 days. Right? 2 days, yeah. Yeah. So like, what I wanted to do is like to just present my project and say what I have been doing here at Kyushu University for the past year, and maybe like initiate some sort of maybe conversation that can come up during the question. Please come in during the question time, or like just for you to think about, because. So just to start with, a couple of words about me. So as I mentioned, like I'll go back to Europe in 2 days. I have a position waiting for me in Uppsala, where I came from, Sweden, but I'm originally Italian. But by training, I'm a linguist, and I got my PhD in Reykjavík. That's why I mentioned the Nerd Nite in Reykjavík. I didn't know about it until now. I don't have plans to go back live there any soon. Been there enough. Yeah. So. Yeah, so I am like a Scandinavian linguist by training, but recently, let's say like from 2 years on until now, I've been like widening my horizon to Indo-European linguistics, so like more theoretical, comparative linguistics. For those who don't know, Indo-European languages are the languages that are spoken in Europe, the majority of languages in Europe. Like English, German, Italian, and the Scandinavian languages, but they were formerly spoken also like in the west part of China, and they are spoken like in the northern part of India. Hindi is the Indo-European language, and so on. So it's a big family, and it has been researched heavily since the 19th century. So yeah, there is a lot of material. So as I said, like I come from Scandinavia. Let's say I've been living in Scandinavia for the last 10 years. But then like somehow like last year, like before coming here, like 2 years ago, I read about this money that was up in Japan, and I decided to apply. And back then I had this project idea, which I was able to carry out here in Fukuoka. What was my project about? So basically, how do we think? So basically, my project concentrated on understanding how we sort of make up verbs, specifically verbs for abstract concepts. So like basically, the main idea for my project was, okay, given some abstract concept, how do we make it into a word? How do we conceptualize something that we can't really, picture ourselves? Like, for example, like think or learn or understand, or like in understand you will yourself just recognize right now that this is the stand verb. So this simple idea was backed up by not only by historical linguistics, which is what I do on a day-by-day basis. That would be like the archaeology of language. So like basically you have very bad data, and you like try to go to the roots. You dig as far as you can with the bad data you have. So and the more and the further back you go, the worse the data it gets. So like you get to some point where you don't have data, you have to reconstruct, make up out of what you have. So that's what I do on a day-by-day basis. But my project, so like how do we think, has also an anchoring in cognitive linguistics, which is, if you will, even fuzzier than the work of historical linguists. Because at least you have data. With cognitive linguistics, what do you have? Yes, you have data, but there is an abstract step further in interpreting that data. So like the theory I am relying most on is called the conceptual metaphor theory. And just to give you the gist of it, it says that all our abstract thinking, which is not just like, meaning such as to think or to understand, but it's also like concepts like love, or like abstract concepts, all is conceptualized via your actual body and sensitive experience. If you think like about conceptualization, like how you think, how you talk about an argument, like war, they have the speaker A won the debate against speaker B, and so on and so forth. So it is a tool to analyze language data at large and how the fact how we think. But what I do is not like this whole thing, like from this very huge perspective. I concentrate on one thing, and the thing I concentrate on is verbs. So what I'm interested in, and what I also would like to hear your opinion about, is how verbs such as, for example, like cognitive states and cognitive processes, so to think, to learn, to understand, to teach, how they have their anchoring in actual sensitive experience. And of course, like you find this in your day-to-day life. For example, one of the examples I wanted to bring to you is, for example, like the thinking about the learning process. If we take the learning process, for example, now in my research, because I told you that I focus on on how do we make up this, how do we conceptualize abstract meanings, but I actually focus on a fuzzier thing, which is like verbal roots. But let's put this aside for the moment. So, if we go back to the learning process, try to think like how you think about the learning process. Like learning, it can be conceptualized, for example, as like following someone's path, and of course, like this idea, it's not just like in the English language. You can say like follow in the path of your master, but for example, can also be found in Japanese, where you have these. So for example, if you take like names for disciplines that they end in do, so like there's a path. So you follow a path, you learn the thing, and go on. And probably in Japanese, I'm not like expert in Japanese, but I start to look around myself here in Japan to look for more examples on the thing I was focusing on here in Japan. So all the verbs, for example, in the Indo-European languages, many of the verbs in the Indo-European languages go back to this idea of like following. And in order to reach that, you must do what I do on a day-by-day basis, like this sort of archaeology of languages. So basically, I analyze the verbs. So what I did, I have a list of languages, Indo-European languages from different times and different sub-branches. and I gather the data, and then I analyze it. So this is my data is actually lexemes, it's like words, and not, unfortunately, not like, you know, words in context, because you can also find a lot of other things there. For example, like saying, like, you know, to follow in the path of a master is the same as saying, like, okay, it's conceptualizing the learning process as following a path. And if you go like and analyze like for example, a verb like leren or learn in English, leren and lernen, and learn leren and lernen, learn in English, you will go back to a root, which means to follow a path. But in order to do that, you don't of course, you don't only have to focus on cognitive linguistics, but also have like a grasp and maybe a little more of it in historical linguistics, linguistic analysis. Other ideas that I have observed. So now we're in Japan. I'll mention like 2 or 3 examples from Japanese and how they relate to Indo-European languages. Another example I've come across is the understanding as like dividing. Yeah? So like you understand the bits that you have. You don't understand like the whole together, but you understand by dividing the bits and pieces, and then, you know, you put them together, you understand the whole picture. So for example, like a Japanese wakaru. That's this idea of cutting. And this idea is not just in Japanese, because as I said, like my level of Japanese is right here. It's in Icelandic, for example. In Icelandic, you say skilja. And skilja, scale is a division, skilja is to divide. And that means to understand, but that also means to divide. So you can, you know, use the verb. It's not just like Japanese, you have wakaru and wakeru, so you have like the 2 sets of two verbs, but in Icelandic it's the same. In English, for example, you say discern. Now, in English, discern doesn't mean to cut, only means to understand. But that comes from French and then Latin. And in Latin, that means to cut. And you cut, and you see, and you understand the different parts, you put them together. But that's not just it. So like you can use, now in cognitive linguistics, in conceptual metaphor theory, you have like a source domain and a target domain. Or basically you have a target domain and a source domain. So as I said, like to understand is the target, and the source is the dividing, the actual like sensitive thing that you do with things. The same source can apply to different targets. And on the same thing of dividing, you also have like the knowing as dividing. And if you will, or if you wish, you say, if you wish, actually, you know, you understand, and after you have understood, you know. This idea of cutting, I don't know if it is there in English, but definitely it is there in Latin. In Latin, you say scio. So like that also comes from a root that means to divide. And in the oldest Indo-European language that we know, Hittite, that's even like mentioned in the Bible, by the way, the verb for to know comes from the very same root. So what does this tell us? Well, it tells unless, you know, it can be 2 things. It can be like, you know, Latin and Hittite both made a verb for to know out of the very same root, and this would be like a positive evidence towards we think the same, or Latin and Hittite verb come from the very same like verb of the language that nobody spoke back then. Everybody was dead. We don't have like written record of it. Still positive evidence, because, you know, common ancestry, positive evidence, Polygenesy, also positive evidence. If you understand the positive evidence here is how do we think. So like the idea is that we have a limited set of packaging meaning into words and conceptualizing the abstract or conceptualizing in general. And to find like even within the same linguistic macrofamily, which is Indo-European, to find the same ways of conceptualizing something is positive evidence. Of course, like in the branch of linguistics where I'm like starting to move my for the first steps, which is called typology, which is focused on finding what is common in the languages of the world, what is like, you know, what are the ways the different languages of the world, the strategies the different languages of the world use in order to do X, Y, Z. It can be like, can be word order, it can be like words, and so on and so forth. So if you think about this, one would like to have like more different language, like, you know, Japanese and Indo-European languages and the languages of the Amazonic forest. But I don't have those because I am a little expert only on Indo-European languages. So in order to tackle this problem from another side, I put together languages from different times. And it was comforting, actually, to see that in totally unrelated times and totally unrelated verbs express the same idea sometimes that can come up. For example, if we go back to the learning as following, there is the leren, the lernen, the other verbs that go back to that root. And then in Gaelic, you find another root that also means to follow a track that forms a verb that in Scottish Gaelic, and I was told recently also in Irish, means to learn. So once again, like this root is another root, is the root that gives, for example, English seek. So to search, follow a track and searching, that kind of thing. But in Scottish Gaelic, that means to learn. So also, again, positive evidence of like, you know, we think about the same. And I said I will be short, I promised. So I'll just go on with a couple of more examples. So there is understanding. So I talked about understanding. Understanding is dividing, but there is understanding also, especially in English, as grasping. You grasp something, you understand, and this is like, you know, comprehend. In English doesn't tell you anything. Back in Italian, it does. All the way back to Latin. Comprehendere, prehendere is like grab. Grasp and comprehend. I don't think that grasp was like copied on the Latin. I don't believe so. Or you say I get it. It's just like the same idea. Same idea is there. And the understanding can also be seeing. I see what you mean. I understand what you mean. And then to actually, I don't have a parallel in Japanese for this. So like maybe later someone that actually has Japanese as mother tongue can maybe come up with some parallel, which I would be very happy to write down. The last thing I'm going to say, and this just was suggested to me by Nick Warren, who's here. Thank you very much for coming. About the thinking. Now think. When you think in English, you can say also you ponder. Again, like ponder is a loan word, so it's a word that was taken from another language. So like you can't really analyze it in English, but was taken from French, as always, or Latin. And that's the idea of being heavy. So like what is in your mind is heavy. and you think, and thinking is in Italian is pensare. So in Italian you have pensare, which is think, but you also have pesare, which is to weigh. And both words are the same, actually. They're like the same word. Now there's like some sound change there. So pensare is actually a loan word from Latin in Italian, because usually you don't have N before S. You only have pesare. Pesare is to weigh. But nevertheless, this idea of weigh out your thoughts. So what's on your mind and this sort of thing. And as Nick suggested once, there could be, now this has to be proven by Japanese etymologists, it could be that the verb omo is related to omoi. That could be. But as I said, like I'm just like a newcomer in the Japanese languages, and I wish to learn more. And the way I do is like to look at languages like with the eyes of a linguist. So and also knowing that I might also like make mistakes and make a fool of myself. But nevertheless, like to sum up, and your take-home message is that there are limited ways we can conceptualize thoughts. We can conceptualize what is abstract, what is not tangible to us, and these like limited ways are no doubt reflected in the world's languages, and they can be reflected in very different times, in very different languages, independently. And this is what my research was about, and what I'm hopefully going to delve more into in the next few years. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. We got about 8 minutes for Q&A, so the floor is open. Any kind of questions you may have. I do have one. So it's really interesting how you mentioned different words having similar meanings, even in Japanese and in English or in other European languages. With like wakaru, omo, probably. Is there any other examples you found during your time here in Japan that might like, even if it might not be true, you think, oh, that might be interesting. Or something?
Yeah, there was another one. It was good that I didn't write it down because I have only one other one. So there was one other example that was like mentioned to me in Tokyo like a few weeks ago. There's manabu and maneru. Oh. It was like, was sold to me as we are not sure. But it might be that it is also like this idea of like following with the learning and imitating. But there are like some problems of a formal nature there, because you have like this stem manab. So where does this B really come from? Is this the mana and mana? Is it like waka and wake in wakaru? Or it's something else altogether, and they just like sound the same. Because like in historical linguistics, you have to be aware that sounding the same is not a guarantee. Actually, most of the times it's like be careful. You're like falling in a trap. Like namae and name, namae and name, totally unrelated, as far as we know. So yeah.
Thank you.
Go.
Any other questions? Hey.
なんか質問じゃない。Okay, this might not be a video question, but for example, manabu and maneru, it's written in different kanji.
Yeah, it's written in different kanji.
So is it possible that like maybe the pronunciations are the same, so that's similar, but then afterwards like they make up like made up different kanji?
Kanjis, yeah. Well, with the kanji thing, it's a whole. I feel that it's, and I'm also told that it might be a different story, because like sometimes you have like some. It's not like it's not 100% sure that like the kanji actually reflects the etymology. For one thing, like you know, that one thing that comes from the top of my head. You have tamago. You have two different ways of writing that. It's like, so it's like, yeah, and also like, yeah, like with the kanji, like, I guess Japanese is better analyzed firsthand to the actual words and like to leave the kanji apart, because the kanji might be like, there might be other things that come into play there when you use like one kanji instead of the other. You have like, for example, like, I don't know, like, okay, another example that comes to my mind right now is like, okay, place names, they're weird. Place names are weird in general in linguistics. But what I've noticed here in Japan, yes, sometimes you have like same place name, different kanji. Here you have Gofkumachi, that's written in one way. You go to Kurum, it's written another way. Ito campus. Ito in Ito campus is written one way, Itoshima, Ito in Itoshima is written another way. There is a story about that. So like, kanji use, weird. Yeah, it's another branch of study there. So like, it doesn't really have to tell you that two different etymologies that two words are really unrelated because they're written with different kanjis.
And I think to grasp is harakusuru.
Yeah, and that's also to understand.
Yeah.
There you go. That's very common. The grasping, let's call the manipulating your thoughts and ideas as objects. That's very common. Yeah.
Yes, Icelandic will go ahead.
So I'm Japanese and already Japanese. I'm talking about mom and manner.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure there's a linguistic relationship on there, but behaviorally it's related. So, for example, calligraphy or shodo, if you start learning shodo, calligraphy, first you copy, emulate the teachers.
Right. That's what you do.
Then
Yeah.
finally learning.
Yeah.
Go to learning.
Yeah, but that's the same idea. Yeah, that's the idea of following the path.
Yes,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, you have to imagine me of that.
Yeah, that's why this colleague in Tokyo mentioned this, and he said like, but maybe they're not related at all. It's just like, you know, yeah. But like, you know, there are these pitfalls in linguistics that something look like, you know, makes sense, and then you, yeah, like. It's very tempting to say like, oh, that for sure it's like that. But then there is like this formal like B problem, like, you know, what is this B there? I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah, you had your hand up. And is there anybody behind you that might have a hand up? I can't see from here. We're good? Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So I find it very fascinating that there are, even maybe Japan and the European languages maybe start very differently, but with shared experiences like learning, like the path
Right.
that you use, for example. But there's almost like a one-to-one mapping in many ways
Right.
between a word in Japanese and a word in English, even though they were very different. So, but I also, I guess, in different cultures. So, for example, I'm from the UK. We have, I don't know how many words for rain, but there are a lot of different words for rain. And there's not so many words in Japanese, for example, for rain.
Right.
So when trying to do this, like this comparison, does the fact that the culture and the environment does this complicate what, when you're trying to understand where these words are coming from? That there are maybe multiple words in one language and only one word in another language, but they kind of mean the same thing.
Well, the thing with the rain, I think it's a different. It's a different kind of thing because it relates to the environment, you know, straight away. Whereas like the abstract concepts, they all relate to humans in a finite number of ways. Now, I don't want to say that culture doesn't play a role, because like, of course culture plays a role. Because you might imagine yourself that there's some culture where I don't know, you do things in some way, and therefore the verb for like learning or whatever, like it's in one way. But like, nevertheless, the ways you can conceptualize something must be finite and must be related to our experience of the world if we're talking about like concepts, abstract things. So like what I want to say is that it would be very weird if I found like some verb or some expression that related to learning or thinking or with running in the rain or like chasing a dog. In that case, then you say like, okay, this is weird. This is not like what my theory says. Why is that? Maybe there is like some other. No, I'm not saying it's impossible, but saying if it happens, then the explanation does not lie in what I'm like researching. Then must lie in the culture itself or in some other sort of explanation behind things, because like that would be very weird. So like yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. Sorry, we're out of time, and so you can ask. You're sticking around, so you can ask.
I'll stick around.
All right, another round of applause for Matteo, please.